We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back from the video. In today's video, we are starting our little journey into Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So recently on the channel, we went ahead and rewatched Star Wars Rebels in preparation for the Ahsoka show. And now we are going back and watching The Clone Wars. I have seen it before, but it's been a little while. And then Sarah has never seen the Clone Wars, so we kind of get those two different perspectives.
Have you seen all of it?
Yes, I have seen all of it. Uh, this video is specifically about the movie that came out. So if you aren't aware, so there is like a 6-season show on Disney Plus, but there's actually a movie that was the very first thing that kicked it all off. And this movie actually went to theaters too. So it was like the first Star Wars movie since Revenge of the Sith to hit theaters. It did not do super well, but it made money. So that was good news. But we're going to go ahead. We're going to talk to you about the movie itself. I'm going to be able to talk to you a little bit about, some of my memories of it, because I do remember when I went and saw it. Talk to you about some dislikes, some things we did like, and then wrap it up at the end. So what I can kind of tell you, I believe it came out in 2008. I think I was a sophomore in high school, and well, going to be, because this came out in August, so it was like right before sophomore year. And I got extremely sick, like really bad pneumonia, and I was recovering like in the month of July-ish, and like working my way up to being able to see this movie. And I was supposed to go on opening weekend, and it just wasn't having it. If I would have went, I would have been somebody that was coughing the entire time. I would have been like General Grievous in the back, so to speak. And so I basically made the decision to wait until I was better. So I had to wait like another week or two until I got to see it. And I saw it with some friends. And from what I remember, my friends didn't really like it too much. I think they were really expecting like Star Wars movie quality, like the prequels, so to speak. And kind of when you watch this movie, it's almost just like a 4-episode arc, so to speak, like if you were to watch a season show. Because like in the first 20 minutes, it's that little battle of Christophsis, I believe it's called, where they eventually meet Ahsoka as well. Then we have this little plot about, well, this is the overarching plot, is that Jabba the Hutt's kid was kidnapped by the Separatists, and basically the Separatists are trying to frame the Jedi for the ones that actually kidnapped his son. And so like we have the big battle on Christophsis on that planet, and then we go to the planet where the Separatists are holding the son hostage, and we have a big battle there, which in my opinion, this was pretty groundbreaking for the time. I don't think we've ever seen a Star Wars battle where they are traversing in a vertical direction and fighting a battle. So I thought that was pretty cool for them to come up with. But eventually, they find the Jabba's kid, and then turns out that not only was the Separatist involved, but also one of Jabba's like relatives was in on it too, that was feeding the information to the Separatists. Eventually, the Jedi do rescue the young one and return the young one back to Jabba. But there's a lot of cool things in here that I didn't know about that as we were watching the movie, I was like, man, those voice actors sound pretty on point. And it turns out that there is actually at least three people from the prequel trilogy that reprised their roles for this movie. Sam Jackson reprised his role for Mace Windu. Anthony Daniels for C3PO, and the other one, which this is the one that really made me want to look it up because I was like, I've seen the show before, but I'm pretty sure it's somebody else for the seasons of the show. But Christopher Lee actually played Count Dooku in this movie, which I thought was really cool. He's got a very distinct voice, so it I felt like it was too good to be true, like not to be him because of how much it was on point. So that was super cool to see all those. I didn't really recognize any others that would have been reprising their roles. I got the list here, and no, nobody else is reprising their roles. But also the other big thing that we get out of this movie and heading towards the show is Ashley Eckstein, who plays Ahsoka Tano, and we all know clearly she's made a her footprint in the Star Wars world, not only with her Ahsoka character, but also her fashion line, the her slash our universe. I don't know what the actual like the overarching title is, but we'll just call it that, I suppose.
The
Um,
company name is Her Universe, like it's heruniverse.com, but there are products on there that are branded as Our Universe as being unisex.
cool. That's good to know. I was gonna say it was her universe, but I wasn't entirely sure what it would be. So yeah, the memories that I have, I didn't rush out and buy toys like we did with the actual movies. I can tell you that. Um, but the movie is just that I was super sick, and that's how I remember it. Is basically having to wait and when I didn't want to go see this movie. Uh, 2008. Do you know what you were doing at that time? Like, does it even ring a bell that Star Wars was even in the media?
I think I might have had my eighth grade dance that year, and that's about all I remember.
All right. So
2008. That's kind of the only big memory I have from that year. I definitely wasn't it's not that I didn't like Star Wars, I just wasn't as informed. And we weren't really a family that went to the movies except for like maybe once every couple of years. So this definitely was not a film we would have seen.
it's a very, very different change of pace, I would say, nowadays, with how
Definitely.
many movies we have seen just this year. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a little bit of background on what was happening with the movie. We talked about, what the movie was actually about.
There
Um,
was there was one other character that reprised their role, or
there
maybe not
was.
reprised. Yeah, it might not reprised might not be the right word. Um, but it is his name is Tom Kane, the second, and his voice was one I picked up immediately as being somebody that I had recognized. So he plays the narrator. He actually also plays Yoda in this. Um, well, that's the TV show, I guess.
I was gonna say because the original voice actor for Yoda was Frank Oz.
He plays Admiral Yularen. I guess maybe not reprised role, but it was a voice that I had recognized because when we were watching, um, he actually voiced Admiral Akbar in Star Wars Episode 8. Uh, but he was from Rebels. And so what I remembered him from was Rebels. It was one episode. It's Colonel Yularen, and then in Clone Wars, it's Admiral Yularen, so it is the same character. Um, I guess reprise might not be the right word because this came out in 2008 and the episode of Rebels that he was in 2017. So I guess it's more like in Rebels he's reprising the role. But he's just got such an iconic voice to me that I picked it up right away. I'm like, oh, I know this guy.
It is very distinct. It makes me wonder, like, if we were to meet him at a meet and greet, like, is that your normal voice, or are you doing a little something there? But yeah, it's one where you could just pick it out of the crowd. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think one of his most known things for him, in terms of voice acting, is that he's from Powerpuff Girls. He is the
Professor.
professor.
Nice. As soon as you said that show, I was like, Professor Utonium?
Mhm.
I watched that show growing up. Haven't watched any of the new stuff, but I remember that old stuff is classic. Big fan of
Yeah.
Mojo Jojo.
It
I'm
was
pretty
good stuff.
sure. What's that?
It was good stuff. I really enjoyed that show when I was a kid.
Pretty sure that's my profile icon for like HBO Max or something.
I think
Um,
so.
so then, like, where did this show end up going? I guess we could talk about that a little bit. So, do we know what year that the first episode for the show debuted? When did, let's see. Oh, not that Clone Wars. It says 2008, and it looks like it says later. Okay, the original release. So the movie came out in August, and then the show came out August or October 3rd,
Yeah, that sounds right.
and then ran all the way. Okay, that doesn't really make much sense. I'm not even going to talk about that. Um, So yeah, so the show started in October, so there was just like a month break in between, probably so that it could have its theatrical run, with a handful of weeks. And then they were able to start the show on Cartoon Network. Because remember, this was before Disney had bought Star Wars when this all started. Eventually, after Disney bought Star Wars, they did like that. I think it's called Lost Tapes or Lost something, where it's like season 5 of Clone Wars, and they tried to just wrap it up, but then they came back and made a really good season 6 to actually like officially wrap it up because they knew Dave Filoni had a really good idea and they wanted that on Disney Plus. So money talks, that's for sure. The only other thing I would say about this is that this also spurred a lot of video games. I enjoyed the one on the DS where a lot of the lightsaber battles had the stylus integration, which was pretty cool. And then there was a Wii game called Lightsaber Battles, and then you could fight people with, the Wii controllers. But probably the one that stuck out to me the most, I think it was just called the Clone Wars. But it came out for like PS3, Xbox 360, PS2, all that kind of stuff. It played kind of like a Lego Star Wars game in a way, but it was in the style of the show. As far as the mechanics, that's like the best way I can probably describe it. Very fun game. Follows the show. I don't remember if it follows the movie, but it definitely follows the show a little bit. And then there's one more. Star Wars Lego Star Wars 3, The Clone Wars. That also covered some of the Clone Wars content as well. A very, very cool Lego game if you have never checked it out. It is very different from the other ones. You actually get to do like battles on the battlefield and stuff and command troops, so that's pretty neat. All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk about some tough love for the Clone Wars movie. So stick around. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk to you about some tough loves for the Clone Wars movie. I know Sarah has quite a few. This probably wasn't her favorite Star Wars movie by any means. But I think there's. Why don't you start with with one of the things you have to say? Because kind of what I have to say is going to piggyback, I think, off some of your stuff. So you can go ahead and then I will just interject mine when I hear it because I know it's going to come up.
So There's kind of a few different things that I'm going to wrap up into kind of one main point, and most of it's the art style. So it's it's more broad than just how the characters look. Yes, that is part of it that I'm not really a fan of. It's kind of a weird choppy style that I'm not used to seeing. Some of these characters look fine. Obi-Wan and Anakin, they look fine. I can't talk. Count Dooku and the Emperor, they look ridiculous. They look nothing like themselves. Like they're Count Dooku's face is like 8 miles long. It's so crazy. Ugh, not for me. You want me to keep going, or you want to? Was that
So
part?
as far as the animation, so I had not seen this movie in a very long time, and I haven't seen like the early episodes of the Clone Wars probably for about 3 years now. I watched the entire show from beginning to end during COVID times, and because that's right around when season six I think might have came out. I don't know, but anyways, I remember when we were watching, just like there were some scenes that looked pretty bad compared to there were some scenes that looked phenomenal. Like they looked like they were up to par, but there's a night and day difference between this movie and season six of the Clone Wars. Like they definitely improved it along the way.
Oh, there were
And
parts of it at the beginning of this movie that I straight up asked you, what's the quality of this supposed to be? Because it looked like it was stop motion. It was so choppy.
I wouldn't go on to say it was stop motion. I not even close that I would say that. But what I would say is that I know their budget was super small. I don't think their budget was more. I think Wikipedia, again, Wikipedia is not, always the best reference. But I'm pretty sure they said, yeah, the budget wasn't even $10 million. So it was very, very low. And so I think some of that carried over into the quality of some of those scenes. Like, for instance, there's some scenes where, like when you turn your head, for example, you don't just turn kind of like that where it's like super stiff and moving. You kind of have like a little bit of movement all over the place. Like I go up and down a little bit, as I turn my head. Where so some of these scenes when I was noticing like Anakin would go to talk to somebody like over his shoulder or someone next to him, it would look like his head is kind of on like a swivel and not like a natural motion to look to the side. So there were different things like that I was picking up on. I also noticed that because we were watching it on Disney Plus has the standard definition version of this movie. There is a Blu-ray release, so I'm surprised that it's not at least up to par with the Blu-ray, but we are used to watching 4K all the time, if not 1080p. And in the early goings of our relationship, Sarah didn't really believe that there was much of a difference between all these formats, but I'm pretty sure
Oh,
this.
hold on here. There is a difference between DVD and Blu-ray.
Oh, you know that now. I know.
It's but it's between Blu-ray and 4K that I'm like, I can kind of tell the difference maybe, but I feel like it's a stretch.
It depends on the film, really. But the fact that we've been so used to seeing things in such a higher definition, including animated stuff, like we'd watch The Bad Batch or Tales of the Jedi, all of that stuff is eventually where this animation goes, but it's definitely not that quality. So uh, I think those scenes where unfortunately it kind of comes through a little bit more than others is kind of what it's almost like a stutter step in a way. Um, when
Oh, you
we
mean like stop motion?
no, it like it pulls you out of the movie when you like just imagine you're like watching a Star Wars movie, you see their lightsabers ignite, and then the next scene that's cut is like two dudes out in the front lawn playing with plastic lightsabers. It's not movie quality. You want the CGI with the background. You want the lightsabers to look like real lightsabers, not these plastic things that don't even go into the handles. You got to push it down. Uh, it's a very out there example, but you want the consistency of the animation to be there throughout the whole movie. And I think it's noticeable that there's a couple of parts in there where they didn't spend as much time. Because I think they put all their money into the like action scenes because those looked really good. But it was like these small little other instances where it wasn't quite up to par.
Yeah, I think to kind of go off of that was the other part of my point in terms of art that I was going to mention, which was how it was filmed or like what camera angles specifically that they chose. Because there's two big things that really bothered me as somebody who gets motion sick, right? One was there was a lot of fast moving objects coming either towards the screen or like out of the screen. And those types of movements don't really do well with my motion sickness. Not to say that like, I felt sick watching this movie, but it makes me feel uncomfortable, it doesn't make me feel normal. And
This
so
movie makes me sick.
it kind of takes away from the experience. The other portion that was happening very frequently was a lot of uncomfortably close-ups whenever somebody was talking. Oh my goodness, it
Yeah.
happened so many times. And now that you tell me about their budgeting issues, I kind of wonder if they did that so that they didn't have to draw a big background. Like, well, if we make the character take up half the screen, that's half the background we don't have to draw, you know?
Yeah. One thing I will say that it helps a little bit is that I think when they made their video games, the animation translated very well because it's a little cheaper animation, and then you make the video game.
Well, speaking of video game style animation, one of the scenes in this film was like a first person shooter, like as if you were the person in the battle. I don't think I've ever seen that in a movie. That's crazy to me. I
I
can't
think
handle
it's
kinds of games very often. There's few that do it well that I'm okay with, but there's some that just it doesn't work with.
I think it I think that is to get the audience more engaged with the battle that is going on. Um,
But they did it for such a quick second. I'm like, what was the purpose of that shot?
I don't know. I remember something that was a big complaint when this movie came out, and I was wondering what your thoughts were since we have not talked about it. What did you think about the battle droids and how much they talked and how much comedy they were trying to provide?
What comedy?
So like there was a like the one that I actually thought was kind of funny, but maybe some people don't, is there was a scene where they were trying to find the Jedi on the ground at the bottom of that pillar, and the one droid was like sector blah 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 and just ran off a bunch of numbers, and the droid next to him was like, section what? Like, what number did you just say? And he goes, right there, look there, kind of a thing. Uh, so weird stuff like that. And there's also like the one droid was trying to use the binoculars to look over the edge, and he got too far, so he fell off and then he hit the ground. And the other droid was like, get back up here and do your job. But clearly he was dead, because he hit the ground, short circuited.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of this like small comedy within the droids that they try to push more and more in this animated show than they had ever in the prequel trilogy. So I was kind of wondering what you thought, because that was something that older audiences really did not like.
Droids in general are something I've been becoming more open about. Um, more accepting, I suppose, of them having more personality because it used to be that a droid was, like wired to do exactly as it was told or whatever the wiring was, and that, droids having a personality or feelings wasn't really a thing. But more and more movies and shows have been coming out to, kind of show that they interact like a person, they can make jokes like a person. Um, but with the battle droids, I still don't really, I didn't really necessarily pick up on it when I was watching it, like thinking like, oh, that was stupid or anything like that. But just asking me, right off the bat right here, battle droids are somebody that, or they're a type of droid that I think are so basic and so cheap that they really shouldn't be able to have those types of emotions and feelings. Like I can understand like C3PO for example. He's a very complicated piece of machinery compared to one of these battle droids. So I feel like there's a difference.
Interesting. What did you think about the banter between Anakin and Ahsoka?
It was kind of cringy. It wasn't really my favorite. It seemed forced for a good chunk of the time. Um,
I know it gets better because there's some like serious burns that people make memes out of from the show.
yeah. It part of it might just be because, I hadn't seen the prequels in a little bit here, so maybe I'm not super used to Anakin like being sarcastic or sassy or whatever, like um I'm kind of just used to him being uh turning to the dark side and those types of emotions and feelings. I'm not used to seeing him as a good guy because I haven't been exposed to this before, so it's kind of weird to see him have those types of feelings and emotions and stuff towards someone other than Padme.
Gotcha. I
I
feel
just
like
said,
he did a decent amount of back and forth with Kenobi in episode 2 and 3, but
yeah,
it does it gets better. I can say that. I think we got to remember a little bit. I'm pretty sure this is one of Dave Filoni's first big projects. And so, his storytelling has evolved since then. I mean, he's the one that's in charge of Ahsoka, and we're all like, yeah, Ahsoka. So,
now speaking of Ahsoka, can I just say it's kind of weird that she's like a youngling slash Padawan, and the outfit that they chose for her to be like her battling outfit. That's pretty weird, she's in like a tube top. Like, where's her shirt?
yeah,
That's your battling outfit? Like, what the heck?
hey, everybody's got their things, but um,
She's supposed to be
it
a kid.
it was kind of weird that she was a kid and basically wearing a belly shirt out on the battlefield. Um, I don't know a whole lot about her species as far as like the clothing that they typically wear. Um, but yeah, it is an interesting choice for sure.
I just know it's not typical for her. If you Google Ahsoka, that's not like she has so many other outfits that are not like even in that type of clothing that are like in full clothing, like normal clothing. It's not very typical of her character. I don't know. Maybe they learned their lesson from this movie and they're like, all right, moving on. She's got to have a full shirt or something. I don't know. It just was weird. And I just want to, make the statement here if I'm kind of downing, being a downer on the movie kind of a lot, but you got to remember that's kind of just the segment is to talk about the things that you weren't necessarily a fan of. It doesn't mean that it's a bad film. Um, and we're going to talk about things that we like next. So
Say, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it's the Star Wars movie that has the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score.
it is real low. What was it, like 18% or something?
Yeah. Let's see. All movies ranked by Rotten Tomatoes. It is, yes, it is the worst rated movie for Star Wars on Rotten Tomatoes. They do not include any of the like spin-off movies like Caravan of Courage or Battle for Endor. They don't include anything of like those. Um, but all the
Maybe because they didn't
main
go to the theater in the US.
could be, but it's basically all the main Star Wars films that either George Lucas made or Disney made. So Yeah, it had a big whopping 18% from critics. What did it have from the audience? 40%, so not even half the audience enjoyed it. I didn't think it was that bad, but I suppose if you're coming off of 3 years of no Star Wars, and the last one you saw was Revenge of the Sith, which had some like epic lightsaber battles and whatnot. Um, this one was probably a little bit harder to watch, knowing what had just been done. So it was definitely geared more towards a younger audience. Star Wars in general is for kids. George Lucas has literally said this is a kids movie, but this one was definitely a little bit more geared towards the kids. Was there any other tough loves that you had?
No, I think we hit pretty well on them.
Okay, well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some things that we did like about the show. So stick around. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk about some things that we did like about the Clone Wars movie. For me, even though the movie seemed like battle after battle, I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was fun. I didn't think there were very many dull moments in the film. Um, I think what they were probably out to do was to have a lot of action and basically get across the point of this is the Clone Wars. This is war. So we want to show a lot of the war. And so yeah, they had this like story in the background about Jabba's kid, but really what people went there for was the battles. And I thought the battles paid off well. And I thought that they did some pretty cool things with the battles. Again, I mentioned, they had the vertical traverse up the pillar that they did, which was really cool. They had some dogfight space battles that they had, and then I even thought the one that was like the opening battle was pretty cool too. It was just like a back and forth on a bridge, but there were some cool things that Anakin was doing. Like there was these big spider droid things that were coming through, and he jumped on one, and then when one of them shot at him, he deflected the laser bolt to destroy other droids first before he destroyed the one that was shooting at him. I just thought things like that were pretty cool and creative. Um,
That was a very cool battle.
Clearly, they had, this has been done before because the movie is from before. It's nothing new, but it's still exciting. It's really cool. Like, these little things that we see in Star Wars that aren't too beyond what we think is plausible for Star Wars to occur. Those are the things that I think people tend to enjoy more, is things that are just a little bit outside that realm of comfort. Um, so that's probably the first thing that I really enjoyed was the battles, the intensity, and the go 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 of the movie.
Yeah, they had some different droids as well, or different ships. I'm not sure what to call them. They're different battle machinery, I'm gonna label it, than what we'd kind of seen before, like we've seen the battle droids, we've seen the roly-poly droids with the big shields around them.
The
Those weren't
Droidicas.
new. The droidicas, yes, thank you. Um, we've seen the ships. I don't know of a better way to describe them other than I saw them on Jar Jar's planet, right?
The
Like,
tanks.
yeah. They've got kind of a weird shape to them, but there were other weird ones that like we hadn't seen before, like the like giant spider kind of looking ones that you were mentioning, where Anakin jumped on one and like sliced the arm of it off with his saber, so then it wasn't able to walk anymore. So then the tank was useless. I don't know. There were a handful of other droid machinery that was new and kind of interesting to see. Uh, just to provide some flavors to the battle, like something different, you know?
Right. They're setting the tone for what was yet to come with the show. And I can tell you, I mean, we're not talking about the show in particular with this podcast, but there's a lot of things that do end up happening in the show that grow Star Wars. It's not just watching mindless battles all the time just for the heck of it. So there's a lot of good stuff to come as far as, like we said here with the droids, building on things that we already know that are a thing and revolutionizing them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Uh, what was something that you liked?
On a very different kind of note, I really liked Ahsoka. I thought she was fun. She was kind of testy, testing Anakin's patience. She was kind of like a wild child. Um, but she was also kind of wanting to demand respect of herself, because they kept calling her youngling, and she's like, "It's Padawan," like she almost got kind of grumpy about it because she kept getting called youngling, and just being able to show that personality, I thought it was fun.
Yeah, it's cool to see, because like what you said, we're watching the show. It's kind of cool to see where she came from as a kid. Like, how did she actually learn all this stuff to be a Jedi? And I mean, this is just the very beginning that we get to see her, and we get to see her grow through the entire show. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but in this show, she only had one lightsaber, and eventually we know she gets two, and eventually
I
we know
was
she gets
just thinking about that.
colors, and so we get to see that process all happen too. So,
Yeah.
and she has it like the backwards way, not forward like Anakin. I was surprised he didn't make a comment. At least I didn't hear him make a comment about it.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, well, that's a weird way to hold the lightsaber, and wondering if he would pick up on it or if anybody would pick up on it, but nobody said anything. Maybe it's
Right.
not as weird to them as it is to us, I guess.
Could be. I think, I think on film she was the first one to do it. I'm trying to like run through all the different Jedi I remember, but I'm pretty sure on film she is the first one to hold it that way. Something that Another thing that I liked was I liked that there was a way to incorporate Padme a little bit in this movie too. I feel like it could have very easily just been like a focus on just battles and Anakin and Obi-Wan and them just being, oh, and Ahsoka, and watching this trio being awesome the entire time. But there was also ways to get some other characters involved. I know I talked a little bit about like Sam Jackson reprised his role, very minimal role. I think he was in like the first 5 minutes in like one scene, and then I don't think we see him ever again. So that might have been just a small thing that he was a part of. Um, Christopher Lee is in the entire movie throughout. Count Dooku is very much a part of everything. Um, One thing that I started to wonder about a little bit, because I don't remember 100% everything from the Clone Wars, is that in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin says to Dooku, "My powers have doubled since the last time we met, Count." And in this show, we see that he has a match with Count Dooku, because a lot of times when he says that in the movie, we think back to when they fought in Episode Two, because that was the last live action section, and it makes me wonder if they fight more in the show, because the more that time, you know, shortens, uh, it seems a little bit like a different take on what those words actually meant when he said it.
Yeah.
Who was not in this movie? You remember the one person that's like pretty important for the Clone Wars?
Uh, I don't remember. I swear you asked me this when we were watching the movie, and I'm like, I don't know. And then you said who it was, and I felt really stupid. I know you're asking me again, and I still don't remember.
General Grievous. He was not in this movie, which is very weird. You would think that they would have had, all their like main characters involved. He does have a like 4 episode arc right away in season one, so maybe that's just they decided to save him for that. Um, but one of the things that's kind of cool, and it applies to this movie, obviously, because Grievous wasn't even in it. But there is a line in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin says, or yeah, Anakin says, "You're taller than I expected," which means he had never seen him before. So they actually make it a point in this movie and in the entire show that he can never see Grievous in person.
Hmm,
So it's kind of like one of those fun little things that if you don't really think about it, you won't notice it. But once someone tells you, you're like, I'll be. So just some
interesting.
fun things. Was there anything else that you really enjoyed?
You know who we haven't talked about yet is Ventress.
Yeah, Ventress. We got to see her cool lightsaber.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen her before in any way, shape, or form in terms of media. I know her
The,
from, huh?
the other Clone Wars you've seen.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. You're right. But anyway, I mainly remember her. Sorry, words are hard today.
They are.
I mainly remember her from our Star Wars board game that we like to play, called Villainous, where you get to pick there's a Disney one, there's a Marvel one, there's a Star Wars one. But any of them, they all kind of play the same. You pick a villain, you have an objective to reach. It's based on whatever character you picked. There's preset characters you get to pick from depending on which board game you pick up. And one of them is Ventress. You get to play as her, and trying to get her objectives. I think for her, it's like getting a certain number of bounties completed or something along those lines. I'm heavily paraphrasing here, not to go too far down that rabbit hole.
There was a
Uh,
handful of missions
but
that he had to do.
right. Um, so to be able to see her in like a more active role, I thought that was pretty neat. And you are right, now that you say that, I kind of remember seeing her in the other Clone Wars movies that we watched. But it was still neat to see her in this aspect, in this role, and her bickering with Obi-Wan and going back and forth with him and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see her back in it. When this movie came out, it didn't make a whole lot of sense because, we already had that base of a Clone Wars from the other Clone Wars show. And so now they decided to do this other animation and really expand on it instead of, having a 2 hour Clone Wars show essentially. They wanted it to be more in depth. And so when they restarted, basically, they brought her back. So that was kind of like our key of what happened before isn't really what we want to go off of now. This is its own thing, because Ventress died in the original. At least I'm pretty sure she didn't survive that fall that she had. Um, and it was a big thing that Anakin had potentially killed her as a Jedi. But then we get to here and it's all restarted and we get to enjoy her time a bit more. I think it was a good choice to bring her back and let us dive into her character a bit more because she does eventually have a very cool story arc. I'm pretty sure you don't know this, but eventually she kind of uh, gets indecisive about being part of the dark side or not. I think Dooku like betrayed her or something at one point and then made her question. And then she ended up like dating a Jedi. And then I don't remember how she died, but it's a very interesting story arc. But
It's weird because I don't really picture her having feelings.
yeah, she does seem kind of like a emotionless slash wanting to destroy everything type person. But I thought it was cool that we got to see her lightsaber in the S formation a little bit. It was very, very quick and subtle because once she fought with like Kenobi, she had them apart. But I think it's when she saw Rex, um, and was interrogating him about where Anakin and all them were, she had her double bladed out very briefly. And so It was cool to see that. It's not every day that we see a double bladed lightsaber that is actually connected in the S formation. Uh, I guess just one last thing to talk about, what I liked. I really liked their vision and where they wanted to go with this. It's super ambitious to like put a movie out and say this is going to kick off a big series, and then they didn't even break $100 million at the box office. In my opinion, it's I would expect a Star Wars movie to break 100 million. Based off their budget, though, they did really good. I mean, it says on Wikipedia the budget was 8.5 million, and at the box office they got a little over 68 million. Um, I still think that's incredibly low. No, even if it's animated, there's plenty of other animated movies that came out and did way better. But they use this as a platform to kick off a show, and it's a show that people love. A lot of people put it up there with Rebels. I think a lot of people put Rebels over the Clone Wars, but it's definitely up there in quality, and it definitely progressively gets a lot better. So I hope you look forward to a lot of that cool stuff in the future.
I'm very curious to see where this show goes because, like I said, I'm kind of struggling with the art style and how things are shot and whatnot. And maybe it'll be different once we get to the TV series. I don't know because I haven't seen it yet. But we'll see. I'm trying to stay open minded.
The animation will progressively get more crisp. I can tell you that. Because like I think I told you off camera that eventually this gets to the animation style of like the Bad Batch, like that's where it starts to peak. So um they do eventually get there. Just as I believe between this Rebels is a little different because that's kind of I would say that's a different art style, even though it's still animated than the Clone Wars is. But the Clone Wars is definitely more like Bad Batch and whatnot than Rebels was. But when we come back, we are going to have some closing thoughts and wrap it up. So stick around. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of the Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk about the Clone Wars movie in this final segment. Sarah told me that she had a question that she wanted to kick it off with, so what you got?
I was wondering, since you were around, well, we were both around, but you were more informed when this movie came out and keeping track of these kinds of things. Do you think that their hope or plan was to do a series of movies, and then because this one did so poorly, they did a TV show series instead following? Or do you think the plan all along was we're going to kick it off with a movie and then we're going to switch it to a TV show?
I would probably bet money that it was intended to be a TV show. Just because there's so many episodes and I feel like it would be easier for them to get out content about the Clone Wars as a TV show as opposed to a movie. I don't know, excuse me, I don't know how long it took them to make the movie. But again, like my guess is the amount of time it takes to make about 4 episodes. So I think because there was so much story to cover with the Clone Wars and not, just uh make it have to focus on one central plot every 2 to 3 years. Um, I think the intention was to be a show after this. There's a lot of times throughout the shows where there's 2 to 3, sometimes 4 episode arcs. So those are kind of like other mini movies. Um, but I think to have the best in-depth point of view of the Clone Wars as possible, I think that's why they went with the show.
It makes sense. You can cover a lot more variety of topics or characters when you do a TV show. It's just such a weird choice to me to do a movie first and then like continue with a TV show as if this is like season zero, you know, like I don't know of any other shows or movies that have kicked off like this, you know, where it's a movie and then TV show like immediately following. Because it picks up where this one leaves off, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure if we sat down and thought about it for a little while, we'd probably think of something. Um,
But it's not very common.
no, I mean, the one example that comes to mind is back in the 90s. Wow, back in the 90s. When Disney made their animated films, so like Aladdin, uh, Hercules, The Little Mermaid. I think some of those might have been the 80s. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know the dates when all that came out. But a lot of times after those movies came out, there was a TV show on Disney Channel that followed those characters. So has it not been done before? No, it's definitely been done. I just think we don't
Toy
really.
Story.
What's that?
Toy Story. At least with Buzz Lightyear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. That's a little bit different, but um, I really liked that show as a kid. I can tell you that. It's what the Buzz Lightyear movie should have been, but we know what we got. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things like that. I don't believe that those shows of the past deliberately had a movie so that they could kick off a show. I think they saw the success of the movie and then decided to make a show. Whereas this situation, it is we have a show, or yeah, we have a show, but we don't know how to really kickstart it. And so here's a movie to do that. Um, so that's my guess, my best guess at least.
Yeah. It's an interesting approach for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it worked. I don't feel like the whole plot with like Jabba's kid was super important to the show per se. Um, but again, it was those big battles that they were trying to put in your face of like, this is what you can look forward to from the shows, come watch our show kind of a thing. It makes me wonder what the ratings for the show was after this movie, but I don't know. I was trying to look up also, I feel like I remember there were these Clone Wars toys at um yeah, they were at McDonald's. It's kind of weird though because like when they did the McDonald's toys, it wasn't just the Clone Wars that was a part of the toys. Um a handful of them were, but not all of them because there was actually a Wicket that was on a speeder bike that was there. The ones from the Clone Wars, because I got it pulled up, they got like Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Ventress, Grievous. He wasn't from the ship. He wasn't from the movie, which is kind of weird why they would do that. But he was in there. Um, Padme, Yoda. That's pretty much it. Besides R2D2, but that looks like that was specifically from Phantom Menace. So uh I do remember McDonald's getting in on it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see toys from these types of things come out and, you know, how they display them and whatnot. I was just looking up pictures of Count Dooku in here versus live action because I'm still not over it. And his face in live action is not that long. It's a pretty normally proportioned face. He's got a little bit of a receding hairline, so his forehead looks longer than what it really is. But man, did they do him dirty in this movie.
I don't know. I would think of it just as an artistic style. Um, it doesn't bother me. I like it. What I think is gonna bother you, there is something in this show that I wonder if you're gonna be like, what in the world? Why did they do that? Kind of a thing that is specifically with Dooku's character, and I'm curious to find out how you feel about that. It was actually something that was so popular that they put it in Battlefront 2 as a skin.
Do you remember what season that's from that you're referring to?
I do not. Let's see if I can look it up and then figure it all out. But
Okay. Yeah, because most of the other characters look pretty close to what I think they should look like. Like they don't look that crazy. But Count Dooku and Emperor Palpatine, man, they just the amount of wrinkles that they put on Palpatine, and they gave him this weird shaped head, and his hair just looks weird. And then you got Dooku with a really long face. Like, I just both of them, I feel like they look terrible. Like artistic choice or not, they look nothing like who they're supposed to look like.
I don't
Feel
know.
like this is gonna be real harsh. Feel like Emperor Palpatine's face is giving me squished grape vibes, like a raisin, like all crinkled and cracked, and like he's been out in the sun too long and he got burnt and just dried up. He doesn't look like that normally.
I do not know what to tell you. That's for sure. I cannot figure out what season this thing is from.
That's okay.
But
We'll
when
find
we
out
get there,
eventually.
when we get there, I'll point it out to you.
We'll see if I pick it up on it first.
Yeah, that'd be even better. All right. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the Clone Wars movie? I know we had some like mixed discussions on liking and disliking things, but I think overall, in the end, I would still watch this over Andor.
I did enjoy the story of this quite a bit, yes.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. There's that little jab that will get the downvote at the very end of the video. All right. Well, this podcast, we talked about the Clone Wars movie specifically. We will be talking about the individual seasons in the coming weeks. We do have to rewatch them, so I'm reminded what happens in the seasons, and Sarah can actually learn what happened in these seasons. And then we will come back together sometime around the end of each month to kind of go over the different seasons. So look forward to that. If you like this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified every Wednesday when Shoot the Sheev drops. Drops a like if you like the video and drops a comment letting us know your thoughts of the Clone Wars movie. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.